One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It is the best day of the week. And not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 41 years and is known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth to counter the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe. And also be sure to leave your comments underneath this video. All of these very easy actions convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets it in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way that we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And join other friends of this program who help bring this show to the world every single week. And we also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. All right, we got a big show today, so let's get started. Today we have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change. What's Up With That? We have Sterling Burnett. He's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and also known as the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we have Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And of course, we also have our producer, Andy Singer, behind the curtain, making sure the show looks and flows just great. And we want to welcome back to the show a friend of ours and a friend of the show and a friend of climate realism, Dr. Matthew Wielicki, PhD. Matt is formerly a professor of earth sciences at the University of Alabama and is now the proprietor of a Substack called Irrational Fear, where he provides an in-depth look at some of society's most irrational fears, from climate change to politics and everything in between. It's only been around for a little while, but it's already got 7,000 subscribers and is in the top 20 of all Substacks dealing with climate change. So congratulations on that, Matt, and I hope everyone in our audience will soon become a subscriber.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Matt needs to become a streaming partner for us.
Awesome.
All right, we can fit more people. We can fit more guys in, on that slide. No problem at all. But yeah, so congratulations on that. I know I want to encourage our viewers and listeners to check out theirrationalfear.com is how you can get to it. But you can also look up Matthew by name in Substack. He writes several very interesting things there several times a week. So definitely be checking that out. We have a big show today. So without further ado, let's kick it off as we always do with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much. My favorite drop on this show is the crazy climate news of the week with Bill Nye. I would encourage people in the chat, if you have suggestions to improve that, I'm skeptical, but we're open to it. You can leave those in the chat. All right. There's actually an additional bonus crazy climate news that is not in the lineup, in the rundown over here on the sidebar. This came to us. Well, I know, Sterling, you've been on the radio talking about this topic already. And Linnea, you wrote an article about this on climaterealism.com. And the owning a dog is not a wrong climate choice. So go to climaterealism.com and check that out. Let me read a bit for it from the story for everyone. Vermont's WCAX3 news station posted an article from the Associated Press titled, "People Often Make Wrong Climate Choices, a Study Says. One surprise is owning a dog," in which the writers claim that owning a dog is bad for the climate because they are meat eaters. Associated Press writers claim that there are 3 actions that help the climate most, and those are avoiding flying, using renewable electricity, and choosing not to get a dog. The article also claims that because dogs are carnivores, they are a significant contributor to climate change, since farm animals, which will become food, release methane, a greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. They claim that beef is a particular problem on that front. All right, that's enough of that. Linnea, you have a dog, and in fact, regular listeners to Heartland's live streams, including In the Tank podcast, yesterday, Thursdays at this very same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, know this, that you have a dog, because she joined us on the program yesterday when a mailman, he decided to greet the mailman live on the air. So when are you going to break the bad news to her that, she's got to go?
Yeah, well, I'm about to, send her off. If she keeps barking during the show, she's going to get put in her house or something. Yeah, if I hadn't had my mic muted just about 2 minutes ago, you would have all been treated to her joyous annunciation that the mailman has once again come to my door at exactly the time that the show starts. So anyway, but yeah, no, it's real nonsense. They wonder why they're losing ground, right, with regular people on the climate issue. The whole study that they're referencing was one that said basically all of the things that people like to virtue signal about doing in order to show that they are good little climate concerned citizens, like recycling, driving an electric car, that kind of thing. All of those things, the study said, actually have negligible impact on climate, and they're wasting their time, and they all over exaggerate how much impact they are actually having. And in fact, what they should be doing is not flying anymore and getting rid of their dogs. So these, don't take vacations, get rid of your beloved pet. These things are all things the climate crowd wants you to believe now, and wants to, I guess, gain ground with average people on. It's just not going to go well for them, I don't think.
Yeah, when I forget whether I brought the story to Linnea or Linnea brought it to me, but when I first saw it, I thought, well, they've made a real strategic error here. Even if you think dogs are contributing to climate change, telling people that they've got to get rid of their dogs and not own dogs anymore, or to save the climate, you're going to lose a lot of people. I know people that give more money to their dogs than to starving children. They've stepped in it here, and the thing is, it's just idiotic. One thing I found interesting in the story is these guys say, "Oh, well, electric appliances don't do much." Well, hold it. There was a whole push by the Biden administration to get people to stop using gas appliances to save the climate. But now these scientists are saying changing to electric appliances don't do much. But what does do is having your dog put down, and not owning a dog in the future. So I looked into it. They helpfully provided some information, some data. What we know from the U.S. EPA, which these NAS guys love to cite as data and evidence, is that all agriculture contributes about 3.9% of emissions to climate change. Raising beef cattle is 2%. And it turns out that dogs, because they eat beef, contribute 9% of that 2%. And I did a calculation, and that is 0.0018%. Less than 1/100th of 1% is how much your dog, if you believe their argument, is contributing to climate change. Now, I've read the back of my food labels more than once. I've compared dog foods. Most dog foods don't have beef. Now, what they do have sometimes is beef byproducts. My dog food does have beef. but they have beef byproducts. They have beef bone meal. I'm sorry, those would exist regardless because we eat meat and we have steak. And so what do we want to do? Just get rid of this stuff, throw it in a landfill? No, of course, their answer would be, well, stop eating meat. Stop living. That's their real answer to all this is humans need to stop living because we're destroying the climate. And the really, really ironic thing about this whole story, just besides the stupidity of 0.0018% causing climate change, is that these guys have generated climate anxiety among youths. Climate change isn't harming people. Climate change isn't psychologically damaging people, but the reporting about it, the constant barrage of stories saying humans are killing the earth, especially youths, are depressed. Research shows, you got climate anxiety. Well, multiple research studies, study after study shows that pet ownership is a positive for anxiety and stress, and particularly dogs are of a benefit. So owning dogs are the solution to climate anxiety, and they're telling you to get rid of your dogs because they want you to stay depressed. It's crazy.
Yeah, the war on meat is absurd to me. I mean, cattle are phenomenal animals. They take useless grasses and shrubs, they upcycle those into wonderful micronutrients and protein that we could all use, and somehow they are being, thrown in with the rest of the climate warriors, and I mean everything good they want to take away. It's not a winning strategy.
Yeah.
Anthony, you have at least one dog. You need to weigh in on this.
Well, my way in is pretty simple. Imagine some climate alarmist approaching you at a cocktail party and telling you have to get rid of your dogs because they're killing the planet. It'd be the same as if you were asking that person to kill one of their children. So, their whole philosophy is dead on arrival.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm with Linnea on this one. I mean, I think we should just keep encouraging the climate alarmists to keep this messaging up. Because it's a disaster for them. You don't mess with people's kids, and you don't mess with people's pets. And they want to project their mental illness on everybody else to tell them to do these things. It's insane. So
yeah, the AP story was especially funny because they inserted some like bunny propaganda towards the end. They're like, if you really want to save the climate, the pet that you should have is bunny rabbits. And it's like, why?
Bunny.
If you're so worried about it, don't have any pet.
Someone brought that up to me today.
Is going to contribute.
Someone brought that up to me today. They said, well, what about fish and bunny rabbits? And I said, look, I don't care what the pet is. It has an impact. You feed rabbits pellets. Do you think pellets fall like manna from heaven? No, they're created in a factory that uses energy from other things. You're not feeding your rabbit grass. Your fish, fish food comes from byproduct of sea fish, of commercial fishing, which uses a lot of diesel. The trucks transport this stuff.
As an owner of many, well, not many, but multiple fish tanks, many aquariums, I will say that they are almost certainly not energy efficient. Mm-hmm. Especially if you keep tropical fish in high temperatures. Yeah, very much not. I'd love to see the climate impact of keeping discus or something.
Yeah, I think that perhaps.
All right. Well, just one last point on this. We've sent this dog to fetch quite a lot already, but Linnea, you did point out, I think, in an X post just this morning on how. It's not as if your dog is getting, prime ground chuck or something. It's usually a lot of these commercial grade dog foods. It's the waste products, basically the last bits of the cow that we're all done with that ends up in dog food, and they say it's beef. Well, it's a beef bone or it's a beef whatever, right? So
yeah. Well, I mean, we're pro using all parts of the buffalo, right?
100%.
So I don't have any problem with it. It's, the dogs would be eating that stuff anyway if it was digestible. So yeah, right. It's, It
That's
comes
right.
out.
All right. Let's move on to our next item here. I titled it "Yo, Climate Alarmist Rap." And if you were a viewer of MTV in the 80s and 90s, you'll know where that comes from. All right. Anyway, the headline here is from the Associated Press. Pakistani musicians use folk songs and rap to raise climate change awareness. Lord help us. I mean, is there anyone on planet Earth that has not yet absorbed the message on climate change from these people? Anyway, let's read a bit from here. From Umarkat, Pakistan. Villagers hush when Pakistani folk musician Sham Bahi starts singing about climate change, her clear voice rising above the simple squat dwelling. Quote, "We are the people of the South. The winds seem to be blowing from the north. The winds seem cold and warm. My heart is burned from seeing the collapsed houses in the rain. Oh, beloved, come home soon." Sham is from Sindh, the Pakistani province worst hit 3 years ago by climate worsened deluges that affected tens of millions of people nationwide and washed away homes, farmland, and infrastructure. Now, I'll stop here for a second, just say, obviously that is tragic and that is bad, but it is, if you're watching the show, you know that it's not becoming worse because of human activity. It's bad because of the conditions these people live in, which is not resilient. It's third world. It's not very resilient. All right. We've mentioned that. Here we go. A little bit more from the story. Quote, "The meaning of the song is that poor people's homes built on mud are not strong," Sham explained. "Women and children face hardship during the rains because they are vulnerable in the absence of men who go away to work. The women of the house call on their men to return because the weather is so bad." Exactly. Maybe it's not a great idea to live on mud, but a little bit more from the story before we throw into the panel here. Quote, "We can engage a lot of audiences through rap. Through rap, we can reach out to hundreds of thousands of people through our voice and our message." She said, "Hip hop isn't common in Pakistan, but the genre resonates because of its tradition as an expression of life, hardship, and struggle." And here are some of her rap lyrics. Quote, "There are potholes on the road. The roads are ruined," raps Sham. "I am telling the truth. Will your anger rain down on me? Where was Balkistan government when the floods came? My pen thirsts for justice. Now they've succeeded, these thieving rulers. This isn't a rap song. This is revolution." All right. That'll do it for that. And you'll all be thanking me that I didn't try to actually rap that. So, Linnea, I'm going to throw it to you to start off.
Why me, Jim?
But I'm going to throw it to you, without actually asking you a question, just to kind of get your reaction to that whole idea.
Well, I have seen these types of climate raps before on college campuses. I think, what do they call it? I guess it's more like slam poetry, really, at that point than rap. So that's really not anything new. Greenies have been doing it, I guess, for decades at this point. It's always cringe. Nobody likes it. I think most of the protesters at those events usually don't like it either. So I'm not really sure how much impact that this is going to have. I award them no points.
And God have mercy on their soul.
I count it as a positive that they haven't been stoned in a square somewhere. I listened to her rap lyrics and I listened to the song that they said she was singing earlier, and I saw nothing evidenced in either song related to climate change. Men didn't go off to work before climate change. They didn't have weather before climate change. They didn't have storms. They weren't living in mud huts before climate change. The government wasn't responsive to people's needs before climate change. I don't believe any of that.
Yeah, I find this stuff to be very evil. The Western media spreads this stuff around, gives these people notoriety. But the fact of the matter is that it's going to take emissions to develop, to build infrastructure, to protect these people from floods. I watched it as I traveled through places like Tibet, and people would be using yak dung to cook. Energy is human dignity, and they're just inflating this stuff. And all it's going to do is going to restrict development in Pakistan. They're going to be more focused on their emissions and building good flood infrastructure. And, it's the Western world that's kind of amplifying this message. And I find it to be really evil.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, on the bottom of this story, maybe Anthony can speak to this. The AP has a disclaimer all the way down at the bottom of the piece. And it says this: the Associated Press climate and environmental coverage receives financial support from multiple private foundations. AP is solely responsible for all content. It's funny. We've talked about this on this show quite a bit on how alarmist leftist foundations are pouring money into supposedly objective news organizations like the AP to direct alarmist climate coverage. And this is a great example of it. But maybe that disclaimer should be at the top.
It definitely should be at the top.
Let's get a bill passed.
Oh, no, come on. We don't need more laws, but good idea. All right. Let's move on to our second one here. This is the blackballing of realists continues. This story is from What's Up With That? Orwellian firing at the American Journal of Economics and Sociology for publishing a climate skeptic paper. So this was written at What's Up With That by Andy May, whom we've had on this program. He had the gall to say that CO2 is not a problem and that a warming planet is also not a problem, both of which are true, by the way. So let me read a bit from this and we'll throw it over to Anthony. Andy May writes, well, it's official. Marty Rowland, PhD, has been fired from his position as a special issue editor at the American Journal of Economics and Sociology. The reason he was given for being fired was his publication of our paper, Carbon Dioxide and a Warming Climate Are Not Problems. The paper has been cited 23 times, according to Google Scholar. It was first published online May 29th, 2024, and is already in the top 1% of all 29 million papers, followed by Wiley's altmetric tracker. It is the number 2 paper published in the 83-year history of the AJES. Dr. Rowland calls his firing Orwellian, and we totally agree. The challenge by Tinus Pulis is in an article somewhat offensively titled Climate Denialism, cites 2 articles that directly compare, quote unquote, climate deniers to Holocaust deniers. May and Kroc focus on the lack of any real evidence that climate change, whether man-made or natural, is dangerous. Pulis admits there are no visible current dangers, but claims models predict that there will be at least some unspecified point in the future. Speculation, even using models, does not counter facts and measurements. The more formal reviews of our paper by David Wojcik, Kenneth Richard, and Sterling Burnett are all positive. In short, there was no legitimate reason to fire Dr. Rowland for publishing our fully peer-reviewed and well-received paper. The peer reviewers all had comments on our paper, and every single suggestion they sent us was incorporated into the final submitted version, which can be downloaded here, and you can get that at What's Up With That. So, Anthony, this was posted on your website, and I encourage everyone to go visit that. Can you explain and fill in some more details of what's going on here?
Well, this is exactly like ClimateGate. In ClimateGate, the revelation from those emails were that a couple of climate scientists tried to get an editor fired because the editor was publishing something that they didn't like. They eventually succeeded. And this is just wrong. And these boneheads have not learned one damn thing since ClimateGate. They're following the same playbook. Science should be debated in the peer review process. If the science paper is garbage, it will be pointed out as garbage in the peer review process or in the post-review process where there are rebuttals published. Getting the editor fired is a cheap trick. It's a cowardly thing, and these people should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, this is definitely how you manufacture consensus. And while you do that, you are going to lose the public's trust in all science. And so peer review, has its problems, but it was still the best way we could disseminate information in science. Once that gets corrupted, I think the public's going to lose all trust in science. I would argue that climate science has done more to set back all the physical sciences than any other science over the last few centuries.
I think Anthony's talking about this. They have learned. They've learned that if you get editors fired, other editors will toe the line. We don't want to go too, so we don't publish papers. So they learned that lesson, and it's been it's been largely effective. I did review May and Kroc's paper. It was, more than a year ago, so I don't remember all the details of it. But I thought that it made a compelling argument, and it should be out there for debate. I'm wondering if the Journal has withdrawn the paper. If they didn't, why would they fire the editor? And if they did, what was their reason? Because somebody said, oh, well, these look like deniers, despite the fact that it's all what they're denying is some future prognostication from a crystal ball we call a computer, about what the world will look like in the future. It's certainly on strong ground that there are no dramatic changes in extreme weather's not worsening, and that's without question. So this is censorship, but my hope is that this is going to die off a little bit. And I wrote about that in Climate Change Weekly this week, because in 7 months, Trump has changed the debate. They have put the environmentalists, the climate alarmists, on their back feet, because they now have to take seriously the DOE report. That for 20 years now, they've tried not to engage us. They won't debate in public. Skeptics, they've said they won't do that. They won't. They don't want to honor us by sharing the stage with us, give us legitimacy. The media has said, no, we won't have so-called deniers quoted, because that would give their views legitimacy, as if they have a legitimate point of view. And now the DOE, who funds most of this climate alarm, who has funded most of this climate alarm in the past through research grants, has put out its own report, and they're having to engage for the first time. And I think that's great. So hopefully journals will start thinking, boy, there's a new sheriff in town. Maybe if we want to keep respect and continued patronage, we better allow these legitimate papers in. If I were you, Matt, I'd start writing as many places as possible.
Yeah.
I think I have more success on Substack reaching people than writing scientific journals now.
Well, that's true for any academic. Let's face it. You said the public would distrust them based on this. I'm not sure how many of the public read that journal.
Yeah.
When I've written some academic papers, I get citations, but I get citations from other academics. There may be 5,000 people who read a really prominent academic journal. Does that affect the public? Unconvinced, unless the AP carries a story discussing it all.
Yeah, that's right. And the AP always likes to carry the stories with the craziest headlines.
Yeah.
And that just pushes people to make crazier and crazier predictions, right? There's this symbiosis between the journals, the funding institutions, the kind of activist scientists now. I mean, they're half scientist, half activist, and everybody just kind of feeds off each other. The money keeps flowing, the rhetoric gets ramped up, and nobody's held accountable.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, look at how the Dr. Judith Curry, who I know you know, and Roy Spencer and Ross McKittrick, these are well-known, very, very prestigious scientists, and they wrote that report, a climate assessment for the Department of Energy. And now you see all of these, all these academics and all these people who have enjoyed every perk of their position because of the position they take on climate. Now suddenly they're for both sides to be shown. Now suddenly they want a full accounting and a full examination of the data when they haven't wanted that in 20 years. And so we're going to see this now.
They fought transparency for 2 decades. They fight the Secret Science Act every time it comes up. They said we can't share the data, and now suddenly they want transparency. And we've got a debate. That the Nature article that sparked my commentary said climate science is unsettled. It's like, hold it, I've been told for 20 years, 30 years, it's settled science. The debate's over. Suddenly they discover that there are still questions to be asked.
It's terrible messaging if you want to keep your funding going, saying that we know all the answers, we settled this question. Okay, great.
I've said that on stage in the past.
Yeah.
I've debated these guys, and I said, so you say the science is settled? And they say, yep. And I say, okay, so we can stop funding your research and start putting it into trying to respond to climate change because we know humans are causing it and we know we need to respond to it. So we don't need basic research anymore. Like, all of a sudden they're sputtering and go, no, we still have some questions.
I do enjoy backing him into corners like that. That is my favorite.
I enjoy Sterling doing cartoon voices. All right, we'll move on to our next one. We'll move on to our next item here, and that is green intentions are the road to hell. This comes from climaterealism.com, which is a website that the Heartland Institute runs, titled "The Road to Hell is Paved with Green Intentions." This is a guest post at climaterealism.com by Willis Eschenbach, and he notes, quote, "The media has been talking extensively about New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy's energy plan, saying that it will do little, if anything, to quote unquote save the planet. It is a bad idea and will, in fact, unnecessarily raise electricity prices for millions." This is all true, of course. He continues, "Sometimes you can't help but marvel at how much we are all willing to pay the price for the illusion of green progress. New Jersey decided, like half the country, that climate purity would be achieved by wind turbines, solar panels, and endless press conferences declaring victory against the bad old fossil fuels. But someone forgot to run the numbers. And now the bill arrives with a little note attached titled, 'Due immediately, no refunds. See your monthly utility statement.' Now, Willis goes on to note that there was an instant 20% rate hike for electricity in New Jersey residents in June of this year, and that is 24% higher than the national average, and a 60% increase in electricity bills in New Jersey since 2020. And here, let me quote one last thing from this story. Willis writes, "Here's the kicker. While the advocates chant that solar and wind are the cheapest forms of energy, the real world keeps offering up rate hikes, capacity crises, and bills that read like a ransom note. What we're buying isn't reliability or affordability. It is a perpetual promise of future savings forever in the next quarter if we're lucky. So New Jersey residents get stuck paying for capacity. The grid can no longer guarantee. Backups for power sources that quit at sunset, and transmission lines waiting for someday." Now, Sterling, let me start with you here. Heartland, we are involved in a long-running lawsuit against wind power off the shore in Virginia. We don't have to get into all that details right here. But, the reason why the Heartland Institute and CFACT and others are trying to stop this madness, this idea that green energy is cheap. It's not. It's not cheap. And we keep seeing more and more proof every day. He froze. Oh, my goodness.
That
Right
wasn't
there,
just
Sterling.
me. That wasn't just me.
No, go ahead.
So look, we at Heartland, we look at data, we look at research. We try and base our claims on solid ground, not speculation, not talking about the future, what we expect based on models. And the data is clear, 100% certain. As you add more wind and solar to your electric grid, any region it happens in, any area it happens in, you face two things: higher prices, which means it can't be cheaper. If the prices are higher, let's be clear, you can't fool people about this. If the prices of their gasoline is higher, you can't tell them it's cheaper. If you tell them that their electricity, that wind and solar are cheaper and we're adding it and your prices are going up, it isn't cheaper. Secondly, they're finding that their reliability is gone down. It's your power shutting off when it's not supposed to shut off. It's your lights not coming on when you flick the switch. This is not correlation. This is causation. Wind and solar are causing prices to rise and causing electric reliability to suffer. And anyone who thinks otherwise, anyone who tells you otherwise, like Governor Phil Murphy, is lying to you. Now, that's true for a lot of politicians. Every time they open their mouth, you can probably bet that they're lying in part, but he's lying in full. There's no evidence whatsoever, despite the claims of climate alarmists, despite the claims of advocates who are profiting, the utilities who are profiting from cost plus building ever bigger wind and solar. Why build a $2 billion wind plant and solar plant when you can build a $4 billion one and make 400 million rather than 200 million? But it's cheaper, we're telling you. It's cheaper what? Than keeping a plant you paid off 20 years ago online because there's fuel cost? It's crazy. And it's illegitimate, and it's a lie.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of speaking just earlier this week in Seattle with an organization called Project 42 that's kind of pushing back a lot of the climate craziness in Washington State. And they talked a lot about free enterprise and what we can do in policy to bring jobs. I mean, there's such a manufacturing sector and technology sector with, Microsoft, Amazon, Boeing. And I kept reminding him, I go, guys, all this stuff isn't going to matter if the cost of electricity is through the roof. All of this technology, all of these manufacturing jobs that you want to onshore that have been offshored in the last few decades require tons of energy. And you can play all these games with policy and all these tax breaks, but if they're paying through their nose in cost for energy, they're just not going to come here and build things. And if they do, whatever they build is going to be incredibly expensive. And so it all just kind of comes back to these costs, and it's a clear correlation. The more renewables you add, the higher the consumer rate, and the less stability the grid has. The Portugal and Spain blackout is clearly a frequency change in the overproduction of solar at that time. And, the grids are really more susceptible to the frequency on the grid than actually the total load. And so if you have these fluctuations in frequency, you see what happened in Spain and Portugal. So higher prices, less stability. I mean, I don't see any benefit in any of this.
Let me break it down for Texas right now because I've called it up. Natural gas is supplying about 60% of the electric power right now, despite the fact capacity, it's a smaller capacity. Where's wind? Let's see. Yeah, wind is the green. It's maybe 2%. We have built so many gigawatts of wind, and it's providing about 2% of the power right now. And solar is providing maybe, 20%. It's a sunny day. That's nice. Not a lot of clouds in the sky. Yesterday, it was much less sunny, and solar wasn't providing much. But the point is, ERCOT, our power provider, gives us a second-by-second breakdown. And right now, coal, which they've largely shut down, is providing more power, probably quadruple the power of wind. It's providing more power than nuclear, and it's providing half the power of solar on maybe a quarter of the capacity.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to add to that? All right. Well, Linnea, I know you live in an undisclosed southern state that does not seem to be very enthralled to the climate alarmist nonsense. And so happily this fad will end before it even hits your state. So we should be so lucky.
No, the state that I'm in is in a RTO that's got a little bit of an obsession with that stuff, unfortunately. So yeah, my power goes out all the time. So it's very unfortunate.
All right. Well, we can always hope. All right, let's move on to our main topic today, which is the climate lockdowns are coming, and we're inspired for this to be our main topic because of our special guest today, Matt Wielicki. So let me read a little bit. It's from his Irrational Fear Substack. He says here that you guys might have also, we were thinking about covering this story all on its own last week, but this is a great time to cover it. So Matt writes, this month, Canadians learned that a walk in the woods could cost more than a speeding ticket. Nova Scotia barred hiking, biking, fishing, and even picnics on forested land and advertised fines of up to $25,000 for violators. The sweeping controls are sold as science, yet the long-term wildfire data do not show a national CO2-driven escalation. Canada's own databases show big swings year to year, a record spike in 2023, and then very quiet seasons. including an exceptionally low 2020. That is not a steady climate signal. It is variability. And so there's some slides here you can see from, you can leave it right there, Andy. Actually, that's where I am in the story. Matt shares here a chart showing the number of fires and area burned in Canada by year. And you can see what he wrote matches that chart. 2020 was exceptionally low. 2023 was exceptionally high, but it's natural variability. He scrolls down a little bit more, and you can see the forest area burned and the number of forest fires that he pulls out for the Maritimes of Nova Scotia. Right there, you can see 2023 was a spike, but it was just an outlier, an anomaly. And then he also pulls out the forest area burned and the number of fires in New Brunswick, where it's kind of the inverse of that. So again, no trends. So Matt, I wanted to lay all that out for our audience, including those charts, and you can talk more about this whole issue. But I also want you to get into why you think the COVID lockdowns were a dress rehearsal for the climate lockdowns to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're seeing a lot of the repeated patterns that we saw in COVID, this kind of real panicked response, and then kind of changing reasons why things are shut down. So they initially said you can't go into the woods because you might start a fire. Most people were like, well, I just go and walk my dog in there. I'm not really going in there and creating, having seances and fires and things like that. And so then they said, well, okay, you might not start a fire, but we don't want you going into the forest because you may break your leg, and all of our emergency responders are now responding to fires. And so we're going to close these things down. It just kind of reminds me of, well, we're going to shut the schools because the kids are going to get each other sick, like the regular flu. And then we noticed COVID wasn't really affecting young people. And it's like, well, no, we got to protect the teachers and the grandparents at home. So let's keep all this shut down. So, I really do think that COVID was this kind of rapid response, but you get rid of a pandemic kind of ends. There is no end to climate change, right? Because climate literally means change. I think climate change is a little bit redundant. I don't know why we call it climate change. I think that's kind of calling like a baseball ball or a tennis ball. I mean, it already, climate in the term has the definition of change, because if we're static on the planet, that means the planet's dead. And so I find this stuff to be repeating, just like with COVID. There's no justification, like you showed with the slides there. Sure, there are these anomalous years. 2023 was one of them. But if you look at those dark lines, the number of fires dropped pretty dramatically in almost every place. And one thing we've learned is that we're really good at suppressing fires. So much so that in California, for example, the fires now burn wood that's 4 decades old. A really smart scientist started to date the actual smoke coming off these fires through carbon isotopes. You probably heard of carbon dating before. And they noticed that the smoke was burning material that was 4 decades old. And if we think about like prehistoric times, we know that California had a recurrence burn interval of something like 5 to 10 years. And so what we're seeing is we have less fires because we're really good at putting them out, but we're leaving a lot of unburned fuel on the ground. So when things get out of hand, you can really have these large area burn years where things kind of catch up. And so this has nothing to do with CO2. This has to do with forest management primarily. We're the wildlife urban interface has really kind of gone away. We keep moving into the forest. I get it. I think that living in the forest is great. We own a cabin in Big Bear, my family, in Southern California. So I totally understand why people want to go to these areas. But we have to understand that as we move into this and we kind of get rid of the wildlife urban interface, there's going to be more fires. So we have seen a little bit of an increase in places that are like forests, but globally, I mean, the acres that are burned has significantly declined. We see that through satellite data. And so this idea that wildfires are somehow linked to CO2 or climate change is absurd. But for the governments, what a great way to restrict your movement. What a great tool to start to think about where you can go, where you can't go, where I can find you. And I just saw that script play out with COVID. So that's why I made the statement that COVID was the rehearsal, but climate's going to be the show.
Yeah. Anthony Watts, you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I experienced the campfire in Paradise firsthand. A house, I used to live in Paradise. A house that I owned up there burned to the ground during that catastrophe. And, shortly after that, President Trump came to Paradise and talked about the catastrophe and talked about raking the forest, and the media excoriating at him because these dumbos, all they could think about is somebody with a hand rake. What he was trying to say is that the forests need to be managed. And the fact that the forests are not managed in California because the environmentalists are basically controlling everything and preventing anything from happening in terms of management or anything like that, these fuel loads get out of control. And that's what happened with the campfire. The same thing happened with the Dixie fire. And guess what? I had moved to another house up near Lake Almanor, and the Dixie fire came within 1 mile of that house. Thanks to PG&E again. Both of those fires were caused by PG&E negligence, not by climate change and not by arson. And so when the Dixie fire got within 1 mile of my house, I said, okay, no more living in California forest. I'm done. And because it's going to happen again, because California has their head up their butt when it comes to forest management.
Unfortunately, it's not just the forests. I think the Palisades fire is another example of unmanaged canyon land. So that's a chaparral ecosystem. These types of systems require burning temperatures such that their seeds can lose the coating that they have. They have this hard coating on the outside of their seeds. So it's literally an ecosystem that requires fire. And, you know, to imagine that the reservoir right next to the Palisades was empty on a time when they know there's 100-mile-an-hour winds coming. There was a firework that went off 6 days before that. They already had a small brush fire. I think that the Palisades fire is going to be the first $500 billion disaster that was completely predictable and completely preventable.
Yeah, completely preventable. Most of the fires in California recently have been completely preventable, and they don't want to do anything about it. They would rather see, in my opinion, they would rather see these forests burn than to do any kind of management, because management might disrupt something. Ooh, you know.
Look, how we managed in the past is we didn't set fires. We didn't do controlled burns. Too often the government's controlled burns, prescribed burns, get out of control and become wildfires that wipe out towns and homes, and the government's never to blame. The government doesn't pay off the people. Accident, but we got sovereign immunity. We don't have to pay anything. How we managed it under Smokey the Bear, up until Reagan, until the first Bush, is we logged timber from forest, 2 million board feet a year, 12 million board feet a year. Under Reagan, less than 2 million board feet a year today. We stopped clear cutting, which clear cutting doesn't look pretty. I'll grant you it doesn't look pretty. But what it does is it takes a whole area out of wildfire danger if you get the brush as well. And you do it near, people want to live in the forest. Well, if you live in the forest, then you're living near fires. If you live in the chaparral, you're living near fires. That happens when you have fuel load. Going back to Canada, Canada has had huge wildfires in the past. Historically, 170 years ago, they had an enormous wildfire. Wasn't a single automobile or power plant in existence at the time. It's much cooler. And even the Canadian Forest Service, they did studies and they said, oh, we've had a declining wildfire trend. Why? They credited increased CO2 with greening the planet and better moisture conditions. So that was suppressing fire. But you can only suppress something for so long, especially when you're going to always have lightning strikes and increasingly just malevolent people who like to set fires, arsonists, in a fuel load. Timber is fuel for fires. If you keep building it up, if you're not managing it, if you're not thinning it, at least, you don't have to clear cut it, but you can thin it so that fires have to leap distances. So bugs have to leap distances. But they didn't do that in Canada. They're not doing it in much of the U.S. And the result is the wildfires we see.
That, and just last week we had this ridiculous story about is wood getting more flammable due to climate change? Remember that one? Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. Wood is more flammable.
I hate to put my tinfoil hat on, but I don't know if any of you guys remember that that United Nations wildlands proposition from back in I don't know, 2012 or whatever. It was part of Agenda 21, all that stuff. It came to my mind talking about the not allowing people to go into the woods and stuff, because that was a major point of that program, was that Western countries should block off large amounts of wilderness from anyone being allowed to access, kind of like cordoning people off in the cities. Basically, it was the most bizarre thing, and it was real, which was just like, it's the same thing with all of the crazy climate stuff that we see now, where they say, well, or the United Nations or the World Economic Forum or whoever will propose something off the wall, like everybody should be eating bugs. And then people republish, hey, why is the United Nations saying that we should be eating bugs? And then they backpedal on it. They're like, actually, we didn't really mean it. But they did the same thing with the wildlands thing back in
But
I think
they've
it was
already done this
2008,
in my town of Chico, California. There are some grasslands east of the city that have something in it called meadow foam, which is basically a mutant version of a larger group of flowers. This particular version inhabits the vernal pools there, and it's homozygotic. It does not reproduce normally. It's a dead-end species, but they got it declared endangered, along with the fairy shrimp and the sea monkey types creatures that are in these pools. And so what do? They get the whole area cordoned off. You can't walk on it because, you might step on one of those things. Oh, my goodness. So their whole mindset of locking things down and keeping people out is very well entrenched in the way that they think, and they have been doing it quietly in lots of places.
But in the process, as they lock all that up, they set it up for fires in the future.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, the city of Chico, to mitigate something that they wanted to build, set aside a meadow foam preserve, a fenced-in area which used to be cow pasture. And the cows actually were helpful. They kept the non-native grasses and weeds down, right? So they fenced it off to protect it. Now it's an overgrown train wreck, but it's been protected by the fence. That's the kind of mindset these folks have.
Yeah. Linnea says she doesn't want to, get into tinfoil hat stuff or put on her tinfoil hat. I will have you know that I have two tinfoil hats. I have a beanie tinfoil hat, and I also have a ball cap tinfoil hat, and I'm saving up to make a sombrero tinfoil hat, but that's going to take a couple of months. But speaking,
I bet you could sell those on the Heartland store.
Oh my gosh, that's a great revenue idea. Sounds great. But the reason I bring up tinfoil hats, Dr. Matt Wielicki, is because your thesis there is that climate lockdowns are coming. COVID was just a dress rehearsal. I just want to, before we go to Q&A, I just want to hit that one more time. Look, if you're not an outdoorsman who lives in the maritime provinces of Canada, you're not locked out of anything. What justification and what kinds of lockdowns would you see coming, and by what authority?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would say no way. There is no authority that could do that. And then I used to own a building in Alabama when I was teaching there that we rented, and the CDC told me I couldn't rent or I couldn't evict people. And I was like, what's the CDC? What authority does the CDC have here? And so what we find is, if you can sell a crisis, you can start to, all that kind of goes out the window. It doesn't matter whose authority. I mean, authority was given to all these different 3-letter agencies that never had it before. And so it's I just see the same type of thing, this crisis, this panic mode. And every time it's, we're the problem. So you can't enter the forest, because I'm glad that they're admitting that a lot of these fires are set by arsonists. I think that this whole system is set up perfectly for these eco-terrorists. Canada has had quite a few of these fires set by arsonists. In 2023, there was a gentleman who set like 10 of them or more, I think, and that prosecution is still ongoing. But, I just seeing that if the government can take advantage of what appears to be a crisis, they're going to do it. And that's why the rhetoric on climate keeps going up. These fires are a little bit anomalous this year. They're going to take advantage of it. Who knows what it will be next time, some heavy rains or floods, and you can't go outside. And, I hate to say it, because I'm going to push hard against it. And I'm a little bit nervous about all this happening, but the more we can kind of point this out and talk about it, hopefully we never have to actually deal with it. But I just kind of see the same script being repeated.
Yeah, well, we'll keep our eye out. We will wish for the best, but but expect the worst. That's kind of the way things go. All right, we're going to get into Q&A here, but before we get into Q&A, I would like to tell you about the sponsor of the Climate Realism Show, and that is Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows, you hear tons of pitches for buying gold, silver, and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there that do that, but I want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and that's the man who runs the company, Ira Bershatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he doesn't employ any high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys like many firms in big gold. He also doesn't deal in rare coins. So when you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in quality bullion. That is so much better when it comes time to liquidate this valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment sent discreetly directly to your home. And Ira is advertising on our program, by the way, because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and the schemes of the World Economic Forum. So we are very proud to have him as a sponsor of the Climate Realism Show. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio or back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will make this process very easy for you. Again, that is climaterealismshow.com/metals, and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us while you're helping yourself. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention to this matter, as a certain popular social media person might say. All right, we're ready for Q&A. Linnea, it's time for you to take it away.
Absolutely. Alrighty, so we have some great questions here today. Thank you to the audience for submitting them. As always, our first question from Diane Selby is, how do the radiated shrimp fit in with the tinfoil hat crowd? I don't know if all of you guys saw this in the news, but they were telling people not to eat Walmart Great Value shrimp because it's got cesium in it or something. So that's fun. I don't know. Boy, we're going to have to come up with a conspiracy about that one. Tell us in the comments what the conspiracy is with the radiated shrimp. What are we doing?
Oh,
all right.
Clearly, climate change caused radiated shrimp.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's
climate change causes cesium to seep out of wherever you find cesium. I think it's an artificial thing we created when we exploded the bomb. So climate change caused us to use the bomb, and it got into the shrimp, and it's just one more thing we have to solve by shutting down industrial civilization.
Yeah, I like the Godzilla shrimp angle. That's very good. Let's see.
Yeah, that's what happens when you use recreational plutonium. You get these Godzilla shrimps.
Exactly. There goes the neighborhood.
Okay, so from Walter, we have this question. How do we make the green agenda so toxic that it would be political suicide to return to? That's a great question.
Yeah, isn't it already at that point?
We're getting there.
I wish. Look, the green agenda has been pushed off and on for about 150 years, probably different aspects of it. A lot of people don't realize it, but well, I'm not going to go into it because I'll get in trouble. Jim will say, "You're getting us censored." So I won't do that. But the point is, it's been around for a while. They have made hundreds and hundreds of predictions over decades. And as far as I can determine, not a single prediction has ever come true. It's always about the future. The Greens are the ultimate death cult. They say the Earth's end is near. They give you a date, 10 years in the future, 15, and the date comes and goes, and they say, "Oh, well, we were wrong. It was 10 years from now." And no one ever just says, "You know what? You're an idiot. You have no standing. You keep mouthing words that don't come true, and we're just not going to take you seriously anymore." I'd like to think it's on the out, but my suspicion is if we ever truly put the stake in the heart of climate change for all time, that it'll be plastic, microplastics, or it'll be some other thing, chemicals. You're being killed by chemicals. We're living longer than ever, but you're being killed by chemicals. They'll find something else that will be just as bad. That the solution is always the same: bigger government, more funding for their research, and bigger government in your lives.
I think one thing that's important is, having a little empathy too, especially for the younger folks. I mean, they've been hammered with this stuff since they've started to read and open their eyes. And, every other TikTok video is something about a doomsday clock on the side of a building somewhere. And there's, countdowns to when the planet's going to spontaneously combust. So I saw these kids, and like their anxiety was real, and their fear was real. It was affecting their lives. And so, I think you got to have a little bit of empathy for these young folks that have been essentially brainwashed by a lot of this stuff.
But you also got to have hope for them. If you follow sort of Winston Churchill's old saying, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart. If you're still a liberal when you're old, you have no brain.
Yeah.
Most people come to their senses as they get older, which comes from what? Experience. Yeah. They've lived through the false predictions for 40 years, and suddenly it's like, hold it. These guys are just wrong. And by the way, I've got to pay a mortgage, and I have to have a house, and I own a dog, and I ain't putting it down.
I would say also never underestimate the power of laughing at these guys. Like the dog thing, boost that everywhere. Look, the climate crazies want you to get rid of your dog to stop climate change.
What?
Normies, people who aren't, political addicts are going to see that, and they're going to think, well, I'm not doing that. And then they're going to move on. It's a matter of making everyone aware of how ridiculous the alarmists are.
Yeah. And just so you put a little bow on this one, because the question is, how do we make the green agenda so toxic that'd be political suicide to return to? Tim Benson, who works at the Heartland Institute, he does energy policy and helps us with outreach with legislators. He shared with us this week a story that he found in the New Atlantis, and it's about Bill McKibben's new book. And it's a new book by the high priest of the climate movement. Reads like the end of an era. I recommend our viewers and listeners to check that out. It's a long read. It's one of those old-fashioned literary magazine reads. It's worth every minute and every word. It was such a pleasurable read, because the thesis of this is that Bill McKibben has led the Democratic Party down a dark path from which they are not going to be able to return very soon because of climate alarmism, and that it cost them in the 2024 election. It's going to cost them again here, I think, in the midterms, with the kind of stories we covered today with the increased energy prices in New Jersey. So it already is, I think, becoming political suicide, or let's just say at least the Democratic Party is starting to feel a little weird in their tummy, and we'll see how it goes from here.
Unfortunately, Bill's has the #1 Substack in climate and environment. So every time I see that, it irks me.
You'll overtake him there.
Let's hope so.
You will. Okay.
Maybe we don't have to make them toxic. We just have to make them ridiculous looking. Like Linnea said.
You'll never had the plot.
We don't have to make them hated. We just have to make them, treat them like the clowns they are. Laugh.
Yep. It's very effective, especially against the left, because they don't have the ability to laugh at themselves. And that's evidenced every time a Republican laughs at themselves. The left always goes apoplectic that, wait, we're making fun of you. You're not allowed to think this is funny. It's pretty great to watch. Anyway, so yeah, laughing at them, that helps. Krabby Sailor says, was this the first time they ever had that happen? Ooh, I don't know what context this was in. Let me remind myself what our topics were.
Oh, no, it had to do with when they fired the editor. That's
right.
It's not. Right. They did it during ClimateGate as well.
Yeah, Richard Lindzen had published a paper, and the editor was fired after publishing that paper while he was a faculty member at MIT. And yeah, this is
a member of the National Academy of Sciences, by the way.
Yeah, remarkable.
Yep, absolutely. Chris asks, is there any evidence at all that shows monsoon season is starting later as claimed in the story? I'd bet a chocolate fish there's little to no change.
I think that one thing that we have to understand is that would freak me out if there was no evidence that there was no change in the weather. That would alarm me much more than seeing change, right? Change is the expectation. And so monsoons will come a little earlier in some years, they'll come a little later. It's probably mainly driven by ocean circulation patterns, but we shouldn't expect stasis because everything will change. And if we expect stasis, then that gives everybody else fuel that, look, it's changing and look how it's changing. And this is why we need to spend trillions. So, we need to make sure that everybody expects that change is the expectation. So, I would be much more freaked out if everything stopped changing than I am because things are changing.
If people go to Climate Realism and read what we've written about different monsoon seasons, look, they predicted they're coming earlier and they're more fierce. They predicted they're coming later and that, oh my God, how will we grow our food because we depend on the monsoons in these countries, and we're not getting as much rain. And then you have other studies that say no, it's about the same as always. But the point is, there is no agreement by anybody whether it's getting worse, better, or about the same. Different researchers posit different things. All we know is that weather, not climate, always changes, but weather changes from year to year. Climate can change over time if the weather consistently changes one way, but that's not in evidence for the monsoons.
Yeah. Engineer Guy, our good friend, commented, need a new term, maybe CDS for climate derangement syndrome.
There you go.
I like that. I might have to share that.
And Claire Reading asks, how much will the data centers affect water, as in water use, I imagine?
I can't imagine it affects it at all. Data centers are not using any lakes or rivers for cooling that I'm aware of. They're entirely air cooled. They may have some water that's in their heat exchanger systems internally, but as far as I know, data centers do not have any open connection to any natural water sources at all.
What they are going to affect is the electric supply.
That's true.
If we don't put
I can put a prompt into AI and create a giant sucking sound on the electric grid.
Yeah.
So to drive that point home, there was a little town, I think in Michigan, that was going to build batteries for semi trucks, and they said that the amount of energy was something like what they'd used over the last decade in a month of operation to build these new battery supplies, and so they scrapped the whole thing.
That's so funny. All right. Bo Gus says, how long do you think it will be before we see stories about how a statistical reduction in consensus is somehow anti-science?
I wish we'd just get rid of the whole stupid consensus thing. Science isn't consensus. That whole consensus that Obama repeated, Cook et al. 2013, is totally made up. I mean, that is a statistical trick. It's very obvious. It's not even a trick. It's just dumb stats. And I'm going to be freaked out if all scientists agree on anything. I'm pretty sure that means that they're wrong. So, what I think Richard Feynman said, science is the distrust of experts. Let's just forget about this stupid consensus idea.
Yeah, it's the assumption that consensus is correct. Obviously, in anything, what would you need? 50% plus one, right? So a majority of scientists believe this, right? So that doesn't mean anything. It's completely meaningless. Consensus is meaningless. It doesn't mean correct.
Consensus is much more, though, than 50 plus one. That's just majority. Consensus is usually like 90% or more. Almost everybody in the world agrees on this one point. Well, almost everybody in the world at one point agreed that the Earth was the center of the universe and the sun revolved around it. Almost everybody in the world agreed at one time that the Earth was flat. Not too long ago in medical circles, they thought that illness was caused by an imbalance of humors in the body. So let's start bleeding people. That was the consensus. in every instance, the consensus was dead wrong.
Look up the consensus on ulcers. I'll just leave that there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that
Well,
one was a classic case.
I'm going to pitch this one to you, Sterling, because I think you probably have the most background in this. But Mike asks, we just had a major price increase, I guess, in Delaware, too. Can Delaware sue Pennsylvania and New Jersey for closing the plants and jacking up prices?
They can't. They'd have no leg to stand on because they are part of the problem. Delaware is part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that's forcing the closure of those plants. Their leaders are pushed. They pushed Pennsylvania and West Virginia to shut those things so we can trade carbon credits. Oh, we get a payoff from all the costly carbon credits. Delaware is probably profiting from carbon credits even as the energy prices are going up. So when you're part of the problem, you can hardly, you're suing yourself. You should be suing yourself.
All right. This is a great question from Jim Moses. Why is there a discrepancy between the ground-based tide gauges that show no increase in the rate of sea level rise and satellite gauges that do?
Well,
I mean, okay, go ahead, Anthony.
Part of it had to do with the fact that the sea level measured by satellites is being globally measured. And so when you get an El Nino, you get this pile up of water over in the Western Pacific. It warms up and it piles up, going over to the west. And so the sea level in the west actually rises because the wind is pushing the water over there. And so we end up with all these El Ninos in the whole long average, creating this extra sea level rise that doesn't necessarily exist at the coast where tide gauges are. And so that's part of the big disparity. Matt, you have something to add to that?
Well, I was going to mention that the tidal gauges are also a little bit more susceptible to ground motion in that area. And so, it all just depends on the interface at the ocean land boundary, whether you're at an active margin where you have uplift or maybe, a volcanic activity, or if you're at a passive margin where you're very quiet and you're dominated by subsidence. And so tidal gauges can be much more susceptible to that. But one thing I noticed was that every time they made a new satellite that was measuring sea levels, Jason 1, 2, and 3, it appeared that it's not like they're just bouncing a beam off. There's a lot of altimetry that goes into where the satellite is, how much it's moving, plus clouds and everything can interfere with the signal. You have to adjust for all these things. But every time a new satellite went up, their algorithm started to tweak even higher and higher. And so, as more and more of this stuff comes out with weather data, and Tampa set a record of temperature recently with an idling Delta jet right next to the weather station. I'm starting to have less and less confidence in these measurements, especially when I see a trend like Jason 1, 2, and 3. Every time the new satellite goes up and the algorithm changes slightly, that we see an increasing sea level rise.
Let me correct one thing here, is that it is not the case that tide gauges show no sea level rise. Sea levels have been rising since the end of the last ice age, and tide gauge show it as well. Some tide gauges don't show sea levels rising that fast. Remember, there is no universal tide gauge. There are tide gauges at specific locations. In some areas, sea levels are rising, largely due to subsidence, pretty quick. Louisiana is an example. In some cases, sea levels are rising about the rate they were before. In some cases, sea levels are falling because land is upwelling or is being added. But the point is, there's no universal tide gauge data. There are discrete locations, and it's different at every location.
If you really want to make them go crazy, show them Oslo, Norway, and how the sea level is falling there because it's isostatic rebound from the last glaciation. Ooh, that will make people go nuts.
Yeah, well, and Jim is and Jim is clarifying. He said the rate, not like absolute sea level rise. And I think that answer was in there, and that was that they have patched on new satellites new satellite data to old satellite data, and every single time they patch on a new satellite, the rate is a little bit higher in the new satellite. So
Right.
we're not sure if it's because they are less accurate than previous.
Yeah,
Or
we've
more
actually had an
accurate.
analysis on that at What's Up With That. Willis Eschenbach wrote a paper about that, basically showing that, you can stitch all these different satellite sets together, but when you look at the trend line for each one, they change with the satellite, and that's not real. That is not nature. That's an artifact of measurement or instrumentation problem.
That sounds like more like a tactic than a trend.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, it's really convenient that it always goes in the same direction for them, huh? When there's an error of some kind.
It's like my
Amazing.
bank. They always overcharge me a little here and there, but they never undercharge me. It's interesting how that happens.
Incentives matter.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, and here's a question that's kind of related to the sea level, or it is related to the sea level discussion, and that's American Warhorse, who I don't think I've seen in the chat before, so welcome, who says, why are seaside properties being brought up when all of it is supposed to be underwater? Being bought up. Sorry.
It's a great question. Ask President Obama, who said the seas would rise and then retired and immediately bought beachfront, coastal property in Massachusetts. The point is that why it's happening is because they don't believe what they're saying. They don't believe what they're saying. People want to live near the ocean, and real estate people really, they want you to. They want on the one hand to say, "Oh, climate change is going to swamp your properties." Insurers don't want anyone living near anything that might flood. And so they glom onto climate change. But then when you have to sell, they buy it up, they snap it up, and they want to resell it at a higher rate because they're going to build, your house is going to be underwater, but the hotel I build after I buy your property, that won't be underwater.
Yeah. No, I think it's because they just kind of cynically promote this stuff in the news in order to scare people and in order to attribute any kind of flood that they get, but they're actually not all that worried about it when it comes to their day-to-day activity. So, I know that sea level is rising. It's very slow. It's probably never going to be a problem for me ever in my lifetime. And so I live in an area that would be, I've twice lived in an area that would be in kind of like a danger zone, hypothetically, for future sea level rise. But 200, 300 years from now, darn, I'm not too worried about it.
And by then, we'll do what the Dutch have done for centuries, which is build infrastructure that lets us survive and thrive in areas where sea levels have risen, but our feet are dry.
Absolutely. Okay, this is a great question from Jerry Palmer. He says, if we all wear tinfoil hats, will we increase the planet's albedo and mitigate warming? I think the answer is yes, actually.
I suggest that the climate alarmists take that seriously and test it.
Yeah. I think we could probably find somebody to fund that.
That would be a geoengineering solution that I could get behind.
There are those. Have you guys heard of Make Sunsets, this company that's trying to put sulfur into the stratosphere?
Yeah.
After decades of getting rid of sulfur and all the money we spent and all the fear of acid rain, now they want to put sulfur back into the atmosphere to do exactly this. I think the tinfoil hat would be a lot safer.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot cheaper to just turn the coal plants on, take the scrubbers off.
Yeah.
I told you I'm working on more hats. I'm doing all I can. I'm just one man. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I send one to Bill McKibben, send one to Michael Mann, send one to all those guys and say, look, do your part for the earth.
And send us pictures.
That's the important part. And send us pictures.
Absolutely.
We would never mock you using those pictures.
No. So, Dr. Wielicki, was the CDC granted the authority re the renters, or did they just take it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how all that went down, but I did talk to a few lawyers at the time in Alabama and said, look, these folks aren't paying rent anymore. I'm going to have to evict them. I can't. This is unsustainable for me. And they told me that the CDC does have this authority right now, whether they took it, whether it was granted to them through some back channels or something like that. I wasn't really sure, but it made me open up my eyes that, this idea that we know like kind of where authority lies in government all goes out the window the moment we're in crisis mode and panic mode. And that's what they're trying to do.
Heartland had a project called Governors Not Gods a few years ago that fought against all those kind of emergency measures that said, and at the federal level too, it's like, look, these measures aren't sanctioned by actual law. They are accreting themselves to them. They're claiming they have this authority, and people are afraid to challenge it. It's going to be costly. If you'd fought it, the court case wouldn't have been heard before the pandemic was over. And that's what they know, is they can do all sorts of bad things to you, and the chances that they'll ever pay for it, by the time you get around to the court declaring they don't have this authority, well, the pandemic was over.
Yeah, and the big losers are the small fish, right? I had 4 apartments. It was just one building, and so it's like with the essential and non-essential workers, you saw that the big corporations could stay open. They knew that the government wasn't going to mess with them, but they would go and close down all the small mom and pops. And so it's the small fish out there. It's the regular people that end up losing in all this more than anybody else.
In Texas, the churches were closed, but the liquor stores were open. Go figure that.
The marijuana dispensaries were open in Colorado and California. Those were essential.
Yeah.
We started with 2 weeks to slow the spread, and a lot of Americans tried to, did that and accepted it, even with a smile, to do their part. And then look what happened. I think COVID did more to make more libertarians than maybe even Ayn Rand did. At least I hope so.
All right, so we have this question from Pete M, and this has been asked by a few people here, and we do have quite a few viewers in South America, so this is good to address. Can you comment on the brutally cold winter that South America has had the past couple months? Thank you.
I'm not super familiar with it. I do know that the West Coast has also had a very cold summer this month, so one of the coldest, and I think a lot of this has to do with the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and the fact that it's kind of stayed negative for a while, but I haven't really followed South American weather enough to know for sure.
It's not just South America. Australia and New Zealand are also having unusually cold. I mean, they all have winter. They always have winter, but it's more severe. There's some cold weather in places during the summer that have been colder than average. In Texas, I guess we're living in a relative nirvana for us, if you don't like to swim in your pool, because we had this summer so far as I know in Dallas, 3 100-degree days. I think the typical average for us is 17 or 18, and I've been here when we had 52 straight days in a row, and 60 days over the course of the summer. We are below average. And they're saying that next week we might be 10 degrees lower than we are now, which is a little bit early for fall to come to Dallas.
Yeah, Jerry Palmer says global warming is selective. Who knew?
CO2 only works in
the
certain
interpretation
areas.
of global warming is selective.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely. Polly says that Australia has had record snowfall in July. Yep.
Break out the skis.
Yeah, it's a bad one down there, guys. All right.
Famous Australian slopes. Yeah, for sure.
We've also had a few people ask us to address, like Peter here says, what are your thoughts on the total ignoring of the DEO report in Europe? And for my response, I would say the thing that comes to mind is that like Don Draper clip where he says, I don't think about you at all. So well, it doesn't matter if they ignore it, if they follow America's lead on policy anyway. So, if America pulls funding on all of their stuff for their green projects, then they're going to be floundering.
They're going to get in line soon. I mean, their economy is suffering so dramatically that I think the young people are starting to get fed up with this because now they're seeing that, I mean, they have no jobs. There's nothing, I mean, I think this stuff, the winds are shifting, even in Europe.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Sterling, are you all heartbroken that Europe doesn't like our Department of Energy report.
Well, I don't know if they don't like it; they just ignore it,
Yeah.
and they ignore it. I ignored them. So it's a break even. What's my complaint? I'll say this: the science over there, and I say the science in bold and italics because there is no such thing as the science. But the science over there may not be shifting much. But the politics sure are, right? Look who is Poland's new minister. Look who has been elected in various other countries and how they pulled out of various climate things. The idea that we should follow the science has always been wrong. We don't elect scientists as leaders. We elect politicians, and they have to weigh benefits and costs. And the politicians over there are saying the electoral cost of continuing this crap is too high for us.
Yes, too high for us, and now it's too late for us to continue the Climate Realism Show. It has been almost exactly 90 minutes, which is now becoming the norm. I know our audience doesn't mind, but we're a little tired, and it's Friday, so we're going to call it a day. I want to thank very much our special guest today, Dr. Matthew Wielicki, for being on the program today. I believe this is your second or third time, and I know you won't be a stranger. Please check out his Substack, beautifully titled irrationalfear.com Substack, so you can find that and be a subscriber. He is in the top 20 of climate-related Substacks, but he is not number one. Bill McKibben is number one. We can do it, everybody. We can do it. Let's move Matt up to number one. I hope you will check that out. Thank you very much, Sterling Burnett, Anthony Watts, and Linnea Lueken, all of the Heartland Institute, for being our regular panel and show every single Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank the audience for being here, especially in the chat. Gosh, it's so much fun to have you here. Bring some friends for next week. Make it even more fun. Always visit our streaming partners, CFACT, the CO2 Coalition. Well, what's up with that? junkscience.com and the Heartland UK Europe. That is going to be it for today. Thank you very much for being with you, and we will talk to you next Friday. Bye-bye.